Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Tobi Dempker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast where we talk about all things related to personal development, leadership, and some culture and philosophy. And we pick a topic and see where the conversation takes us. So, how are you doing today, Toby?
I'm doing well, thank you. Sitting in Sweden. How are things in Hamburg?
Great. It's a beautiful sunny
Mhm.
day, and I'm shameful to admit I haven't been exercising as much as I like, or at least not strenuously exercising, uh, because there's been no basketball. The gyms are closed, and that's my sport.
Oh,
And so I went for a run this morning to realize how woefully out of shape I am. But I went out there and
mm,
did it, and I feel great. And then my usual cold shower, and so I'm top of the morning.
yeah.
So yeah, no,
Right.
feeling great. So I'm excited about today's topic. I'll let you take us into it, but it's one that's near and dear to my heart. So
Yeah. So yes, I for you that are listening, you probably know this by this time that we kind of every second time we decide who's going to take a topic, and this time I just choose a just not easy topic, but a topic that is very dear to us. I thought we could discuss perspectives on coaching. Because there's a lot of different perspectives on it. There's a lot of different definitions of what coaching is about, and there's also there's a big hype about coaching. I think that what is it good for? And when we talk about leadership development, wow, it's a really hot topic, obviously. But I think there's also a lot of misconceptions about what it might be or what it might not be. So I thought we could discuss that and maybe gain some clarity for ourselves and for others, perhaps.
yeah, it's one that's right up my alley. As you know, I've been a passionate coach for a long time.
Yeah.
Fortunate to be doing a job I love. And I agree. There's a lot of misconceptions about coaching and what it is. We hear coach added to a number of things like, health coach, dietary coach,
Mm.
all kinds of things. I think it's interesting when one of the first coaching courses I took, they talked about where the word came from, and
Yeah.
apparently it was when the rich people went to their summer estates, in their horse and carriage, and they brought their children. They would bring a tutor along, and so this tutor riding in the coach, that process of learning, that was the coach, and that was
Ah.
the learning that went along with it. So apparently, I haven't done all the research on it, but apparently that's where that came into play, and it's interesting because that's more the teaching model, and
Mm.
having been a basketball coach before, sports has been using that term for a very long time,
Yeah.
and that's a lot more about teaching and sharing knowledge.
Mm.
Whereas for me, coaching, my purpose is helping people find their own highest potential. But I think coaching, rather than in the business world, coaching rather than consulting, is more leading people to the answers, helping them find the answers that are within them, rather
Mm.
than, because I also do consulting work. When, as a consultant, you're hired for your expertise, and you're providing answers, you're providing solutions, whereas a coach doesn't provide the solution. That's what makes it possible to coach a person under all circumstances. Whether I get
Mm.
asked, am I a business coach or a life coach, and the systemic coaching background that I have allows me to work in all fields, and
Mm.
also whether it's someone who's coming to me for personal reasons or for professional reasons, or companies hiring me for working with their leaders. And I think that really ties in nicely to the whole idea of leadership, because I think that's what a coach does. It leads,
Mm.
a coach leads you to the answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we're talking about what coaching is and what it isn't, and interesting, I didn't know that about that, the coach being dragged by the horses
It
then.
could be a
Uh,
myth. I don't know.
yeah, it sounds like it could be a myth, but we'll we'll have to check that out. No, but I was just thinking of, I mean, both you and I are certified coaches and work with coaching a lot. You probably do it more than I do actually now, but for me personally, it's a great interest, and in my profession, it helps me a lot. I don't focus so much on individual coaching actually, because that's not just not something that I put too much effort into. But I mean, when we're talking about standards of coaching and certification, so I mean, we have ICF that gives a very uh, strict and clear guideline of what coaching is and what it isn't. So, I mean, to start with, when we are talking about coaching here, we're talking about coaching that is supportive, that is building accountability for the coachee. I mean, the person that is being coached to take his or her own actions and decisions and move forward with something. Um, and I get that questions a lot, and especially when we talk about coaching in leadership development programs. So like, well, what do you actually do then if you don't provide answers, and if you can't say any what you should do, and you can't give suggestions and stuff like that. But there's a range of techniques that you can utilize and really practice, and this is where I think it's interesting that these techniques and practices you can it can have such a benefit for your everyday life. If it's as a facilitator, as a leader, as a parent, or as a husband, or whatever, it's fantastic techniques and abilities and skills to utilize to just enrich relationships and conversations, actually. But the purpose of using these skills, if we call them that, is really to deepen the trust and to go further into to some kind of action plan and understanding also what the situation and the problem is about, so we can clarify and facilitate a path forward, right? And by doing that, I mean, it's a process of enriching the relationship and the trust between the individuals, but also clarifying what needs to happen to move forward. So there's, at least for me, when we're talking about coaching, it has to end up in some kind of movement forward, or a way to take the issue or the problem further. So it's not a it's a nice conversation, but not only a nice conversation, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people that come to me for coaching, come with two basic questions. How do I get what I want? Or what do I want? They're looking for either clarity or understanding how to, overcome challenges in order to get where they want to be. So, those are, and there are many different ways to get to those solutions and to help people find clarity and to help people move forward. A lot of times that it's a matter of reframing, the situation, helping them see it from different perspectives. Sometimes it's overcoming their own internal roadblocks, whether they are beliefs that stand in their way, or erroneous thinking, or habits that or fears they need to overcome. And I think there are, that this is, potentially what differentiates a lot of coaches. They specialize in a certain methodology or approach. You have NLP coaches. You have also people who are coaches from different backgrounds, and so you'll have people that are that come from a psychology background, and therefore they may have already been a practicing psychologist or psychotherapist, and then they moved into coaching for whatever reasons. And then for me, I came to coaching first of all. The theoretical side of sports coaching really got me interested. But also, I've been on my own personal development journey for more than 20 years. And so I actually use a lot of the tools that I learned through my own personal development, through, being coached myself, having gone through therapy, all kinds of different things. I apply those into my coaching practice, and I share that experience. And I think the reason that people in leadership and business like to work with me is because I've also got a business background. I've worked years as an entrepreneur, but also in corporations, and so I think the combination of things that helps you build rapport and trust when people think that you can see things from their perspective. But in terms of methodology and approach, there are a lot of different ways, and I really focus on the systemic approach because I believe that there's no it's within human relationships, it's difficult to use a reductionist way of breaking everything down and assuming that when you know the individual parts, you'll know how the whole functions, because it's all about relationships, right? And so that can be sort of the inner system, the external system, but everything is systemic. Everything is interrelated and interconnected. And until you can see how things relate to another, I think it's difficult to understand why things are turning out the way they are. So, yeah,
So
lots there, lots there
yeah,
to
so
look
let
at.
me just understand, and maybe for myself, but also for others that are listening. So when you're talking about a systemic coaching approach, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see that as a sort of a paradigm of how you frame questions and how you may perhaps look at different reflexive practices that you can utilize for the coachee to view relationships with or connect the dots within the system or the problem or the issue that we're talking about, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
systemic principles are basically it's a holistic view. So you zoom out, you look at the big picture, and then
Mm.
you zoom in and look at different parts, and then
Yeah,
you try and recognize the relationship between the different parts.
yeah,
And again, this can be applied. It can be applied to science. It can be applied to relationships. It can be applied to business. Any kind of organization. So I think it just has a lot of different ways of approaching. And I encourage when I talk to people in business, I really encourage them to take a systemic view of things, because it
mm.
really helps understand things much better than just cause and effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know we talked about, I think the first conversation we ever recorded was about purpose, right? And it's so often in coaching conversations that you get into, I have this problem that I need to solve right now. And then it's very frequent that the individual is kind of zooming in on that problem. And then by helping them to, or helping us to just zoom out, we have the opportunity to then to look at yeah, the connectedness and relations between and the cause and effect actually between what you're wanting to fix and what results that will have and what's really important. So connecting to your values. I mean, so I guess everything that we've been talking about so far in these series, we can connect to coaching in some way actually, because it's all these parts that we put together as a whole, and that's part of the coaching process to do that, right? And it's a fascinating journey, isn't it? Mm.
It absolutely is, and it's
Mm.
interesting when you talk about, people will come to you with a problem, and it's so often that, well, I'd say 9 times out of 10 people will come to you with a problem, and then they realize that's not actually the problem, and
Yeah.
when they go deeper and we start to uncover things, and
Mm.
that's so much of coaching is just being able to ask the right questions and
Yeah.
having the patience to listen. So they are often questions people haven't thought of or aren't willing to ask themselves. They have
Mm.
they often you will ask the question, and they will have actually thought of it before, but they never really took themselves to task on it. And so as a coach, then you can really start probing and getting people to examine themselves and their own internal processes, and also get them to re-examine the way they view the world, or the way they view certain problems or situations. And then it no longer becomes a problem. It becomes an obstacle on your journey, to move forward. So it's a lot of it's reframing, a lot of it's just different ways of looking at it, and just gaining new perspective, because when we get within the problem. Einstein, his famous quote, you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it, or something
Mm.
to that. I'm paraphrasing, but
Yeah.
that's a really important one to remember in coaching. Really helps you do that. It helps you step away from the problem and look at it from different angles.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always, when I talk about coaching, I have this very clear kind of metaphor picture of what it is, or part of what it is. I mean, there's a lot of different views in my mind, but one way that I like to look at it is like as a coach to be able to just hold a lot of different kind of mirrors with different frames and perhaps different perspectives in them, so we're able to view ourselves, but also the whole our whole ecosystem actually from different angles and from different perspectives. And by that, just clarifying, very often it's about reprioritizing what's important and what I should be focusing on now that will take me further in whatever it is I want to do. Um, and another thing that I was just thinking about when you were talking about coaching, and that I think is kind of fascinating, and I doubt, sort of personally, I doubt the importance of this, and it's these different niches of coaching. So I
Mm.
mean, if I'm an executive, do I have to go to an executive coach? Do I have to go to a leadership coach? If I want to go on a diet, do I have to go to a diet coach? Um, why are there, let me just ask you that. Why are there so many different niches of coaching?
Yeah, I think people just look for ways to differentiate because it's a growing field and more people entering it.
Mm.
I've heard of happiness coaches. I've heard of all kinds of things. And the thing is, when people are very specialized, um, it sounds to me that they are no longer coaching. They want to be a consultant. When
Mm.
you start to giving people answers for the question, like if they come to you with questions and you're just answering those for them, or you're you're conveying knowledge specific to a problem that they have, I think that is less so the coaching that the way I define coaching.
Mm.
I consider that consulting, and
Yeah.
so I don't think you need to specialize. And I hope that people, you know, when we talk about coaching, that they just it's just like you could say, I'm a doctor. Well, what kind of a doctor? And there it's really important because then you've studied and you've got the expertise, and that kind of knowledge is really important. I find with coaching, what's more important is life experience, and your interpersonal skills that you've developed. So
Mm.
again, asking the right questions, not getting emotionally invested in the problem or the situation that person's bringing you,
Mm.
and having the patience to listen properly. I think those soft skills are really important, and those are important to learn. But everything
Mm.
else is just, you can put a good coach in any situation, and they don't need to know anything about it, and they can, out of the experts in the room, they can actually draw the answers out of them by through the various techniques. That's not to say there
Yeah.
aren't any tools in coaching, and some
Mm.
people differentiate themselves based on the type of tools that they use. Right? I
Mm.
already mentioned NLP. People will call themselves an
Yeah.
NLP coach. I call myself a systemic coach because I use a systemic methodology, but that doesn't limit me to the tools of, I've taken some NLP courses. I use some of the methodology, but I've also been educated in CBT, which is the
Mm.
therapeutic approach, and there are
Mm.
some things that I may pull out of there. And I think actually that's another thing on top of differentiating between coaches. Actually, let me go there in a second. But to get back to what makes coaches different, I think it's the toolbox that they're bringing to the table. And so I talk to these young coaches who've fairly new, and they have their toolbox, and they lay out their process for someone, and they hope that that's going to create the solution, right?
Mm.
And those tools can be helpful, but without the experience of knowing what tools to use when,
Yeah.
or still being able to ask the right questions and still listen for those right answers, I think that the tools are a nice supplement to being a good coach, but they,
Mm.
and they may differentiate coaches because of, they're going at situations from different angles. But I think at the end of the day, a coach is a coach, and a coach will allow you. This is separate from sports coaching, but a coach is a coach because it's a mental coach, really. I guess that could be the sort of umbrella term, because we're
Yeah.
dealing with our people's psychology, and trying to help them navigate their own psychology. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, but I heard sort of alarm bells when we're starting to talk about psychology. Maybe we should just really highlight. And this is extremely clear if you look at the ICF. I mean, it's the International Coaching Federation's guidelines and ethic guidelines of what coaching is, and it isn't. I mean, as soon as we, I mean, it's very clear that we're separating coaching from any kind of psychological therapy
Yep.
or therapeutic consulting or anything. And if we think that if we come across a situation where we think that that kind of therapy or consulting would serve the client better, we are obliged to recommend that actually, right?
Yeah, and that's where I wanted
Mm,
to go
mm,
from
mm.
the next step is when I talk about navigating their psychology, I mean their mental processes, their habits, their the inner workings, right?
Mm.
And you do
Yeah.
that, and the approach is much different than therapy. I find
Mm.
therapy tends to look more in the past, and coaching meets people where they are now and looks forward. And that's a generality. I know there certainly there are different elements to psychotherapy, and I'm not an expert in that, other than having been the recipient, the patient of that, or the recipient of that.
Yeah.
But I think the other big thing is, as coaches, we don't make diagnoses, right? We
Yeah.
don't diagnose. People will come to me and go, "Yeah, I think I've got imposter syndrome," and I'll go, "Well, let's step away from that diagnosis for a minute, and
Mm.
let's look at, tell me what's going on." And so I think you're right. It's a very important distinction that we're not. It's not a therapeutic process, right? It's a
Yeah.
very pragmatic approach to how to navigate the challenges I'm facing and the sort of mental processes that are getting in the way. I think maybe
Yeah.
that's a better way of summarizing it.
No. Okay. But and I was also happy to hear about what you said about different niches of coaching. Something that I come across a lot is that leaders they ask like, well, how can you help someone solve the problem if you don't understand their business or their situation, etc. And it really strikes me that in coaching that sometimes if you come in with a very objective view and you have less understanding about the environment or the whole context of the problem, you can ask really stupid questions, but those stupid questions are great because they clarify, you know, yeah, purpose, or they can bring up these aha moments like, yeah, well, I haven't thought about that before, right? So it can bring us out from that context that we're supposed to be in. So I find it fascinating, how you can. I mean, I don't know anything about software engineering, for instance, but if I'm coaching someone who's involved in that and their leadership challenges that they might have, still, it's really possible to help and facilitate that process of, yeah, zooming out, if you want to use that expression, to look at the overview and identifying what the priorities are and able to find the issues, and also looking inside, what's important to me, why is this important to me, from different perspectives, long term, short term, what do I want to gain from solving these problems, or challenging the situation, whatever it might be. So that, I mean, that trying to stay really objective and really practicing these listening skills, for me, that's so key. And then what you say about what approach you come in with, if it's using a grow model, or if a T grow model, or NLP, or appreciative inquiry, or whatever it is, I think these tools and methods can serve you very well if you, by listening, understand when it's suitable to implement them, right? To
Yep.
to use them. But it's really to having that kind of flexibility and awareness and presence of listening to the needs, and then making very subtle, wise choices of what is a suitable question, or what is a suitable paradigm to use in this context. So I don't think, as for at least that's my personal belief, as a coach, there's no reason to kind of limit ourselves to say that I'm an NLP coach, or I'm a systemic coach, or whatever. There's a lot of different things that we can utilize within the process, but for me the process is fascinating, and how you sort of step on different stones to walk along that river. I mean, that's really the beauty of the whole process for me.
Absolutely. And I think you pointed something out there that's super important, neutrality. You come into situations you're not emotionally invested, you're not in any way committed to it other than helping people find the best possible solution, right? And you're not even going to be providing that solution. You're
Mm,
going to help dig it out of them, right? And so
mm,
I think that's important. And when people are too married to their approach that they use, their methodology, their tools, I think that's limiting because it's not going to work for everyone. There's no one size fits all. That's why
no.
I don't work with a template. I don't have one approach that I use. I try to measure where people are. I use a tool to measure where people are now when we start, so that they can reflect and see how far they've come. But other than that, there's no kind of standard thing that I use with people, because different situations, different people, different challenges, they just require different tools. And so
Mm,
I think I think knowing when to use those and when to apply them, but relying on your tools to get the job done. I think any good craftsman will tell you. It's knowing what's the right tool for the job. It's not letting the tool can't do the job for you. So
no.
I think that's a really important thing to note. And when people come in with expectations, I usually try to clarify with people, what do you understand about coaching when we start, and what,
No.
understanding what their expectations are. Because as you said before about the psychology, if I uncover some kind of past trauma, I
Mm,
will encourage people to see a therapist. And I have, if they're here in Hamburg, I have a few people that I recommend, or even internationally, depending on the language they speak. But
mm,
I just finished some sessions with a client in Spain who parallel does some therapy as well.
mm,
And then I'm always cognizant of that. I think it's really good when people let me know that they're also pursuing this path of therapy, because then I can be respectful of that, and make sure that I'm not interfering with any of that therapeutic process. I think that's really
no.
important. So definitely on the psychological side, I'm very careful about that, and we don't. And I think there's a stigma behind therapy for some people, and so they'd rather go to a coach. They feel a coach doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. And it was my own resistance to therapy many years ago was, well, I'm not mentally ill. I'm I wouldn't want to admit that. And fortunately, we've come a long way in mental health, and people are a lot more comfortable
Mm,
seeing a therapist. But especially men, there's still a lot of men who think that's just a lot of pseudoscience. And
mm,
admittedly, a lot of the psychological realm is still theory, but I think people need to remember that theory is not the same as hypothesis. They are tested theories that seem to work, and they've delivered results.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's another important distinction, and that's a reason why people will sometimes come to a coach when they've got emotional issues, but really what they need to be doing is going to a therapist. That's an important
Yeah.
distinction.
And I mean, you touched upon it there. Also, that there are really big cultural differences in how you view this process of, is it okay to get therapy? I mean, in the Western world, yeah, as you say, I mean, luckily it's getting more accepted, and it's a normal thing to do. You go and see a doctor if you're not feeling well. But I know that in a lot of different cultures, it's still very much sort of under the carpet that, no, this is not something that you want to bring out to the daylight for others to know about. It's kind of a shameful thing. And that, if you're just looking at organizational well-being that I'm dealing a lot with, that's it creates a lot of problems if you can't even discuss it, if you can't even bring it onto the agenda. So there's still a lot of work to do, and I know there's a lot of people out there who are working very actively to promote this issue, to just put it on the agenda.
Yeah, I remember in my early days of my own personal development, I read a lot of Wayne Dyer and listened to some of his talks.
Mm.
He took a more spiritual approach as he got older, but certainly there's, he's a well-educated, or he was, he's passed away sadly, but he's a
Mm.
well-educated psychologist with a good practice, and he talked about, people, his vision would be to see people proactively seeking psychotherapy or some kind of mental health practitioner in order to in the way that same way that you would go to a doctor for a checkup, and just some kind of a prophylactic approach to mental health. And so
Mm.
I think it's important for people to, we talk to leaders, and one of the problems is people will get promoted in companies and they're automatically expected to know how to be a leader. And the same thing goes for navigating your own, inner systems and mental health. Is, we're born into this world with no, uh, training, with no kind of a manual. And so and we've learned so much, from neuroscience to psychology, and just there's been so much study done. There's so many brilliant minds working on this, that we have so much knowledge now that it just seems that it would be, you're just doing yourself a disadvantage if you don't go out and at some point in your life, proactively seek out, how can I get more out of who I am and what I can be in life, and
Yeah.
what am I letting stand in my way? And so I think if more people took that approach, thankfully, there's a lot more people privately coming to coaching now than before. And I think maybe the COVID situation has caused people to have a lot of time to reflect and realize
Mm.
they'd like to work on themselves. But, it was before coaching, in order to be a coach that could put food on the table and pay your rent, you basically exclusively had to work in the business fields, or
Mm.
the majority of your work had to be there. Otherwise, you're just scraping by, because a lot of people don't think it's money well spent to go to a coach for their
Yeah.
own personal stuff, and that's changing, and that's really encouraging to see. And then, because obviously, when companies pay for your coaching, that's great, and
Yeah.
by all means, go for that. But I think people on a personal level can really benefit from coaching. And
Mm.
we're both coaches. Luckily now I have a lot of great coaches in my network and we'll coach each other when we have an issue,
Mm.
and so I will regularly, at least once a year, speak to another coach and talk through some stuff. And then sometimes
Mm.
it's just, it's proactive. Sometimes an issue that I want to gain some clarity on, and so having that other perspective. And
Mm.
that coach will ask me the questions I'm not willing to ask myself, and
Yeah.
it's a really helpful part about being in that coaching process.
Yeah, yeah, and a few things there. I think it's really important for people to know that, I mean, people who are working with coaching are almost kind of supposed to, or it's expected that we also get coaching from others through. I mean, there's a lot of different communities that we can utilize, but I do a lot of peer coaching through ICF, for instance, and it's really important for us as that we continue our personal development journey, and that we can feel and see the benefits of being coached. And I guess it's really important to be that kind of role model as well, but to understand the benefits. But also, I was just thinking of when how common it has become to be coached, or become a coach. And when I started coaching, I had a teacher who had this vision of people nowadays, or have been saying, what is, like, what, you go and see a coach? Oh, what is that? And his view upon it would be, in a few years it should be more like, what, you're not seeing a coach? You don't have a coach? I thought that was quite interesting. But it's, I mean, it's a great momentum for coaching in, of course, in the business world, and also in the personal world. And I thought, I mean, we could discuss a little bit more, talking about perspectives on coaching, of the benefits not only for the individuals but also for organizations and for leaders. Why is it so important? And I think if I start that thread, but if we're looking at trends in the organizational development that we're looking at now, I mean, everybody knows that we're going into a more uncertain, rapid environment. Organizations are really grasping of ways of becoming more agile, more responsive to change, to deal with this landscape that we can't really foresee what's going to happen, but we need to be very nimble and agile and fast. And I think this is one of the reasons why coaching has become so much in demand for as a leadership capability right now. It's not only, I mean, one of the things is about accountability and motivation for the individuals that the leaders are coaching, but it's also to allow ourselves to become more rapid and create more accountability, more autonomy, so we can make faster decisions that are closer to the market, closer to the customer and the client, and much more organic. So if it's expected for each individual in the organization to act on own decisions that are, and we're coaching each other to create that momentum, the effectiveness and the efficiency of the organization can increase so much. So I think there's a real strong belief there now, and then the management philosophies in these organizations are pushing this to the agenda. And that's, for me, that's really interesting to see how much of a momentum there is in that environment for this right now.
Absolutely, and I think that is a really good point because what there are so many tools at our disposal now, and there are so many experts, consultants, people writing books, different models that you can use in order to frame situations or to navigate or create new processes for the type of organization you have, or with your own approach to leadership. You know, there's just such such a variety and also volume of information out there that it becomes difficult. And so, as a coach, what you're able to do then is help someone then process and digest a lot of that. I think because I've been involved in workshops where we're giving training on people. For example, people think that agile equals scrum. Scrum is that's what agile is, and agile is a far bigger concept and approach to organizations, and whereas scrum is a process that's part of that agile framework. But there are just so many different methodologies, and then but what they focus on the process, but they don't focus on the human element, right? So I think as a coach, you can talk people through, okay, so I've tried to implement this, and then you can look at the feedback loop. What's the feedback that I'm getting, and you can help them gain perspective on what does this mean to me? How is it affecting me? What's what's my own baggage that I'm bringing to this? And I think navigating all the different pieces of that is a important part of the coaching process, because in German, when I explain what coaching is, we use the word Begleiter, and that's someone who accompanies you. So I think that's a really good way of putting the coach is, you don't need to be an expert in what that person's going through, but you can accompany them on their journey through whatever issue and challenge that they're coming to you with. And you can take, as you said, you don't have to be an engineer, but they'll lay out the problem for you, and you can ask the stupid questions as you put it, or you can say, come over here, what if have you looked at it from this angle, have you looked at it from this perspective? And I think that's what the coaching process will do.
Yeah. And also, I mean, allowing those perspectives, I think in the contemporary working environment, I mean, more and more cross-functional collaboration and cross team. I mean, we're talking about X teams that we're working with in projects and systems that are going all over the place, actually, and we need to understand what's happening in different domains. And we can't be experts in everything, but then to be able to understand and look at these different perspectives. I mean, the maybe the most fundamental thing is to be able to listen, right? To listen to what's happening there, what are you seeing, what problems are occurring for you. And I mean, again, we're coming back to that as a fundament in coaching, to practice your listening abilities and your listening skills, and be able to take in these perspectives to create a bigger understanding of what you're doing, and then together as a unit be able to commonly solve a problem, or move forward with it. I mean, it's such an important essence of making this new kind of working, making it work, right? Just being able to listen and see and gain perspectives from others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's important about that, whether you're, top of an organization leader, or whether you're a private person, or someone just sort of entering the workforce, regardless, you will bring some baggage with you. And by baggage, I mean you'll bring some assumptions, you'll bring some ways of thinking. And actually, I was just on the weekend listening to a really interesting. I believe he's a behavioral. Well, he's evolutionary. It's Robert Sapolsky, but I read a book on that called Behave years ago from him, and so he was talking about how how we, in order to reduce the amount of mental processing we're putting things in categories. And by putting them in categories, we create borders. He gives this example of, light is actually a spectrum of colors. And then, but we put a border that says this is red and this is pink, or, this is yellow, this is green. And we, by defining it, we put borders and limitations. And then the across the border there's something that it's not, and within the border it's something that it is. And yet the things very close to the border still have commonality, and yet even the things within the border have differences, right? And so when we categorize things and we put them in buckets, right, and then it makes us overlook things. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is we have a lot of cognitive bias. We have a lot of assumptions. We do these things in order to help us make sense and gain clarity in a very complex world. And so by doing so, which is very helpful and very important, but in doing so, it also makes us miss things. It also makes us, our assumptions, we overlook the fact that we've made the assumption, and it becomes a belief, and then the belief becomes reality and fact. And we forget that actually it started as a few core assumptions that we've just now adopted as if it's real. And so the coaching process will help you dig through some of those biases. And that's why it's so important to be neutral and go into things and be able to pull people out of this kind of assumptions and this paradigm that they've created for themselves, and then help them see it from another angle, and then just broaden their scope of what's possible. And I think those are all things the coaching process will help you do.
Yeah. Interesting. I was just thinking of the process of laying a puzzle right now. I don't know why, but it's something that I've been more previously during the COVID pandemic that I was spending a lot of time with. But it's a fascinating process of putting all these pieces together and creating a whole, and how important it is to step away from what you think that you're seeing at certain points. And then when you come back and look at it, you can see the big view, and you've stopped looking at, you can sort of reload or deload your assumptions and look at it from a fresh perspectives, and then you can solve it. So I mean, that's I see a great analogy with laying puzzles there as well.
Yeah, and I think actually, first of all, my apologies to Robert Sapolsky for not knowing his actual area of expertise and what he teaches as a professor. Although I'm sure he'll never listen to this podcast. But I think the point is there's just a lot of really great information out there for you.
Mm,
There's so many great resources, and I guess the benefit of using a coach is we are constantly learning, and hopefully, as a coach, you're not just relying on your one methodology and never educating yourself further. I'm so fascinated by human behavior and the way our mind works and so on that I think I try and switch off between, because I'm also a literary fan, so I try to still complement my nonfiction and reading with a bit of fiction now and again. But
mm,
I think there's just so much, like I could spend every day reading. There's so much information out there, and so I'll find myself doing the dishes, listening to a podcast or listening to some kind of a YouTube seminar. There's so many professors now that have all of their lectures online, and it's just
mm,
I mean, I could spend every day of my life just learning. But I think
mm.
that's another benefit of using a coach, is hopefully a good coach will have listened to, I was listening to a podcast someone recommended to me about the woman who was responsible for HR at Netflix, and,
Hmm.
and wrote this whole manual over 10 years about culture
Yeah.
and so on. And so there just are so many resources out there. And as coaches, then we can help use those to give more nuance to, and then we'll also develop our tools from that basis, and learn from other coaches in order to go, well, the stuff I have in my toolbox hasn't worked so far, so I'm going to borrow from this, within my network, and use those things. And I think having a coach who has that kind of broad perspective, lots of different methodologies, lots of different uh, examples and case studies, that's a benefit as a leader in an organization. You
Mm.
don't have to read all of the books. A coach can recommend some for you, but you can have the kind of Cole's notes of what I need to know about certain topics
Yeah.
by having the coaching process. And again, okay, that's a little sharing knowledge, but at least it helps. It helps people kind of guide their way through things.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's about gaining perspectives, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's also one thing that we should probably mention, that coaching is, I mean, it's not new, but it's a fairly new concept actually. When we're talking about leadership development and sort of leadership attributes that we should utilize, the coaching leader is a fairly new, compared to others with other concepts, and of course, there's lots and lots and lots of research being done on this, and there are very positive signs of what the coaching style can deliver to, and there's a lot of positive relationships between coaching and well-being and high performance, etc. But it's also very difficult to pinpoint, and this is a lot of the problems when we're doing research within these areas, that it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly what is leading to a higher performance, or to a higher job satisfaction, or whatever it might be, because there's a lot of different factors that leads into this result. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of research done, but it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly what it is. And when we're talking about coaching, it's fairly loose concept still. I mean, we're trying
Hmm.
to define it here. So it's not one way to do it. And that also makes it very, very difficult to say what is good and what is bad coaching. And different persons that can have a lot of different experiences with it. And I mean, we that are both giving coaching but also have real positive experiences with being coached. I mean, you can probably understand that we are enjoying the process. However, it might also be a lot of situations where people feel, no, coaching didn't really work for me, or certain situations where it wasn't suitable. And it could be, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, but it could be that a certain coach didn't do a good job, or didn't choose a suitable style that was fitting for the coachee or whatever. Or it could also be in specifically now, if I'm talking about leadership situations, that in certain situations, maybe coaching isn't the best style to use. If we're looking at, for instance, leadership styles by Goldman, if we're talking about a coaching leadership style that has a very positive or a mostly positive effect on followers, but in certain situations you don't have the time, or maybe if the person doesn't want to be coached, for instance, then it's not going to work. And personally, I've had that experience where I was coaching one executive, and the individual wasn't interested, didn't really believe in coaching, and after a while we have to sort of take the decision of this approach isn't suitable for you, and it wasn't. So
Yeah,
then it didn't work. Yeah.
yeah, that's a super important point that I was just getting ready to, and then you threw it in there. It's a fundamental principle of coaching is you can only coach someone who wants to be coached, and this is a pitfall of some of the business coaching contracts that we get. They have a someone in a leadership position or someone who's been with an organization for a long time, and they've just kind of their performance has deteriorated, and so they then force that person to get coaching,
Mm.
and if that person is not willing to go through the coaching process, there's no you can be the best coach in the world, and you won't get anywhere with that person, or it'll be very difficult. So the willingness needs to be there. People need to be willing to change and willing to work on themselves. And I think that the the whole coaching process and finding the right coach is kind of like finding the right doctor or accountant or any kind of service provider that you're going to work with. They it need to be the right fit for you. I remember when
Mm.
I was first many years ago looking into therapy, and I went to 3 or 4 people until I found the right person for me. And then even then, I found different approaches that different people took with me, got different results. And so, there are numerous different types of therapy that you can do, so you don't have to just go to one therapist. So I guess similar to coaching. So coaching is the same way. It's about finding the right person who's the right fit for you, making sure that now is the right time for you to be getting coaching, making sure that the reason you're going for coaching is the right one for the coaching model, for
Mm.
the coaching approach. As I said, it might be that you need some therapy, or it might be that you just need a little time off and need to regroup. So is it the right time for you to get coaching? Is as much a question as, and are you willing, as it is the coach themselves. And I think I have a really interesting example of I had a client years ago that I was coaching, and he was happy to see me every 2 weeks and just talk about his problems.
Mm.
And I'd be, well, did you work on this? Did you try this kind of technique that I gave you to do as homework? I didn't get around to it. Oh, I've been,
Mm.
I meant to do that, but he was perfectly happy just to complain and talk about his deficiencies, but there was really not a lot of willingness for him to make progress. And as a coach, I want to have success too.
Mm.
I thrive on seeing people improve and grow. And so at some point, I said to him, I can keep coming here and talking to you, but do you really think this is adding value for you?
Mm.
And then he agreed, and I stepped away. And I think a coach that will work with you for years, and whether you're making progress or not, you just got to question is that good value for your money, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of the process is also to think about the long-term goal. I mean, to setting if you, I mean, frequently in coaching, or I guess the most common approach is that you agree on a certain numbers of sessions to start off with, and then you talk about a sort of long-term goal. Where do you want to go? A kind of a vision goal, but also then in each session to be really clear on what do you want to get from this session. and that's part of the objective setting process. And then you have a long-term goal to work towards, but also a short-term goal. And during the session, this is what is so fascinating about the process, right? That during the session, it might be that that goal changes.
Hmm.
Know what? No, that's actually, this is more important. So should we go there instead? Yeah, let's go for that. And that's kind of the I mean, discovery path that we go on, creating this awareness that, oh, I thought this was the most important thing, but it's actually something else. So yeah, it's a fascinating journey.
It's
But
a
also I would just recommend that for anybody that's interested in coaching, that there's a lot of coaches available, and I'm sure that all coaches can offer some kind of chemistry call. They have some kind of introduction. So try out a few different coaches and see what works for you. There's a lot of different styles, and but it's important that you feel that you find someone that you can trust, and you build rapport with this person, and then you can have a really fruitful journey together.
Absolutely. It's a two-way process, right? It's not
Mm.
okay. You throw your problems on the table and you expect the coach to solve them for you. I mean, that's not going to get you very far. It's a collaborative process. It's someone who's going to accompany you on that journey, and if you are in the right state and willing to go through that process, a good coach can take you a long way. And there's no reason that you can't do a couple of weeks of intensive coaching and then come back for check-ins, 6 months later. So, it's about when you feel ready to move on. And people ask me, well, how frequently should we do this? Well, there's, like I say, there's no template to it. I've had people who wanted to really power through something, then we worked weekly. I've had, I flew to New York for a CEO, and we worked 2 days intensively, 2 full days of coaching. Those things can work too, but I think it's just important that you work at the pace that you're comfortable with. And if you try to do things too fast, too quickly, the things you get out of a coaching session will process within you. You'll
Yeah.
start to, you'll think about them, and it'll take some time for you to make the mental adjustments. And so sometimes for some people, it's a month. They'll need 4 weeks between coaching sessions. So there's no one right way to do it. I think to have one coaching session a year probably won't be that productive, because there's too big of a gap. But I think that you can have intensive sessions, you can have frequent or less frequent. It's all about finding the right rhythm for yourself, and so the coaching process is also one where it helps you to get to know yourself better, right? Through that coaching process.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I just mentioned before, it's a great way to just strengthen your self-awareness. Because you talk about a lot, I said this already, maybe, but I mean, you have the opportunity to connect with your values and what's important for you, and your whole belief system, and you can question a lot of things. So it's really super interesting.
Yeah, and
For
I think
me, I mean, in terms of my self-awareness, I mean, being able to be coached, but then also being a coach to reflect on these kind of questions a lot. I think that process also helps me a lot.
And actually, one thing that I find really interesting as a coach, because I've been immersed in the material for so long, is that I will sometimes I'll go, oh well, you probably already know this, but and so you think that the things you're talking about are common knowledge, and there will be some people who've kind of well, they've heard this speaker talk, or read this book, but it's a I think as a coach, it's really interesting to see that there are a lot of things that average people who aren't in our line of work aren't aware of, and you
Yeah.
realize how much you can share, and how many sort of aha moments come out of these sessions where did you realize, and again, it's breaking people free of their biases, or just giving them new perspective by asking the right question, or just kind of showing them some sharing some information that lets them see things in a different light. So it's mind expanding, and it's a great process also for the coach. I think
Mm.
it's something that it's funny that I was hesitant to admit to people, but with every a coaching client I have, I'll get something out of it as well. I'll learn something about
Yeah.
myself, or I'll go, oh yeah, I can totally see that in myself, or I'll be going, well, have you thought of doing this? And I'll remember, actually, that's something I wanted to do a little more as well. So I
Mm.
think it's important. Don't expect your coach to be this kind of enlightened guru who, who's seen the light and now knows it all. I think that's unfair. That's an unfair expectation. Even
Mm.
someone as successful as Tony Robbins in the U.S., who, he's very centered in NLP, but he does a lot of other
Mm.
things. Very different approach to me, but that guy's been doing it. I remember as a teenager seeing infomercials from
Yeah.
Tony Robbins. So he's been around a long time, but clearly he's not a guru that's going to know everything either, right? So
No.
so yeah, I think that's recognize what coaching is and what coaching isn't.
Mm.
It's gonna help you really expand your perspective and help you work through things, so you're not trying to do it alone. But
Mm.
nobody's gonna, it's not a it's not a replacement for your pastor at church, or your kind of
No.
it's not a guru. I think that's a really
No.
important one.
No.
Any coach who kind of sells themselves as a guru, I think, approach that with caution.
Yeah. But I mean, hopefully, going through the process, you'll identify that you can uh, gain motivation and clarity around what's important to you, and how you can go about things to move forward.
Yeah.
And also, and actually, I just want to throw this in there, because something that I haven't worked with so much, but something that is very appealing to me, and because I'm coming more from the facilitation point of view. I actually, I mean, I started studying coaching because I was doing facilitation, and we're using a lot of the same methodologies, and a lot of the certain skills. But then when it comes to team coaching, to be able to help teams, to taking whole teams through a coaching process, that's something that I enjoy extremely much. Because it's a there's a different dynamic to it. It becomes much more, well, not more complicated, but there's more perspectives and dynamics in the room, and that's something that I'm very much interested in.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to apply some of the coaching techniques in a group setting, and
Yeah.
seeing different reactions and different responses to it. That's a really fun thing to do, and I think obviously we've both been facilitators and been given workshops, and it's really. Just a different dynamic. I love it. I like it as well, and it's a lot of fun to do. And you can see some really great results. I tend to like the sort of one-on-one that I get with people, but
Mm.
I like both. So I think the benefit to group settings is that the participants can see, they can share results, they can discuss it afterwards, they can give feedback, and they can talk about their experiences, and I think that can be a really beneficial thing. And what I find, a lot of people who will have a coaching session will go, well, some of the things we talked about, I talked with my partner or with a friend, and
Mm.
it really, we expanded on, and they come back with more questions. So I think the interactive part is really helpful. So whether it's in a group setting or someone has one-on-one coaching and then goes away and has a discussion and comes back,
Mm.
you'll inevitably have that effect. And it's
Yeah.
great, because it means that the wheels are turning. You're starting to broaden your perspective and think about things in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. It's we're I guess we're lucky to have our jobs, right? Or to be
Absolutely. I'm
doing what we
grateful,
do.
grateful every day. So, anyway, I think we can probably talk for hours on, I know I have a lot to say about coaching, a lot more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this feels like a good place to wrap up for today. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, next time we can talk more about coaching, but we can have a more specific angle to it, perhaps, and then we can go deeper into the subject. I think this is more overview, just to discuss a few different perspectives on coaching, and I think it's been beneficial to me as well.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I think it would, there are some high level coaches that I really respect, and it would be interesting to take some of their approaches. I think one of the first coaches in the U.S., Timothy Galway, who wrote
Let's go. The inner game
the
of
inner game
tennis.
of
Is that,
tennis, the
yeah.
inner game of work, the inner game of golf, all the inner game series, and he really inspired me back in the early days of my coaching. So yeah, it would be interesting. Maybe we can have a session and talk about some really successful coaches and their approaches, if that's helpful for people. But yeah, that's definitely more to come on that, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so let us know if you have any certain topics related to coaching that you want to know more about, and we can discuss that.
yeah, absolutely. And if you want to book one of us for a coaching session, you can reach Toby through LinkedIn and me through my website. Shameless plug. And yeah, I think for anybody who's interested in knowing more about my approach and my thinking on a multitude of topics, I do write a weekly blog, or once in a while I'll skip, but for the most part it's weekly. And I think probably Toby, you're probably posting on LinkedIn and stuff, or you give obviously courses. You're more of an educator than I am, so I think we come at it from different angles, but we always tend to find a lot of common points to meet on. So
Yeah,
so yeah. And as
definitely.
always,
Yeah.
we encourage people to send us your comments. I've just told you how you can get in touch with us. We'd love to hear comments, and if you have questions or you'd like to have us cover a particular topic, feel free. We have lots of things that interest us that we can go on and on about. But for people listening, it'd be great to cover a topic that listeners are really interested in. So.
Yeah. Apart from us. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. Well, look, as usual, great conversation. Thanks for joining me again, Toby, and
Thanks, Peter.
great topic. Thanks for bringing that one up. It was like one right up my alley.
Mm.
And for everyone listening, thanks for joining us. Again, if you enjoyed the content and you think it would be helpful for others, on YouTube, you can like and subscribe, or pass on our link for our podcast. We're just really eager to have more people, come in contact with this. This is all about sharing the love, sharing the knowledge, and so if you think it's helpful, then share it with a friend, and we'll reach more people. So, with that, Toby, thanks. Have a great day. Look
You
forward to
too.
talking to you soon, and
Well,
look forward to sharing this with listeners next time you tune in. All right. Thanks for joining us.
thanks. Bye.
Cheers.